and also a couple of the tips and tricks we've accumulated over the years.
So what exactly is a notebook? A notebook is the written documentation of the entire team's journey from the very beginning of your season to the very last competition. It includes the progress at meetings. Every single meeting that you attend, you will be writing about, making like tasks and reflections and whatnot. The reflections and descriptions of outreach events. So like any outreach events that you attend or host, you will be writing about and be looking out for those, and like testing of like, you know, mechanisms or coding fixes or future plans and things like that. Really anything that goes on at meetings or that's related to your team goes in the notebook.
So why is a notebook important? First of all, if you look within FTC, we have the order of progression listed on the side, and 9 out of the first 15 advancement slots do require the notebook. So if you didn't have a notebook, you're basically cutting your chances in half of qualifying, and you're relying on your robot performing well, which, I mean, everyone hopes that it will, but you never know when things are just going to go wrong or you have a bad match schedule or whatnot. So the notebook is really the one constant that if you can come in with a solid notebook every time, then you are setting yourself up to win any award, because every award does require having a solid notebook. And beyond first, it also will help you in the future. So if you want to go into engineering or basically any field, you're going to be required to have strong writing, and in most STEM fields, you need strong technical writing. So the documentation style that you're learning now with the notebook is going to teach you stuff that you're going to need to apply in the future.
Okay, so there are 2 different options for your notebook. You can have 1 notebook or 2 notebooks. 1 notebook is much easier to fill. However, you can write less stuff down. You can't say as much. The other option is having 2 notebooks, which gives you much more room, but it can leave your notebook feeling empty. But 2 notebooks allow you to organize everything better. And yeah.
So the different style options for your notebook would either be electronic or handwritten. The pros for electronic is that it's accessible anywhere and that multiple people could be working on it at the same time. It also allows you to reorganize it if you decide that you don't really like the style you had started with. But the con to an electronic notebook would be that it's harder to prove integrity. Judges like to see that everyone is working on the notebook and that it's an equal effort from everyone in your team. But when you're doing it electronically, there's no way for them to actually see that different people were writing different parts unless they like tried to analyze your handwriting or your writing style. But for an actual handwritten notebook, that fixes that integrity problem because they would be able to see differences in handwriting styles throughout the notebook. The con to that would be, though, that it can only be in one place at once, which means you can only have one person working at it at a time.
So meeting logs are basically just what you write for each and every meeting you want to write. Tasks and reflections, you want to start with attendance and goals and agenda. And goals and agenda are important. The goals can basically just be the tasks. Like, for example, a task might be like you can see finish autonomous program, and then it would be followed by a reflection. For example, you know, we identified an error and we fixed it and it was cool. So these are very important for generally letting the judges know what's going on at meetings and that you understand what's going on as well.
So one of the most important sections in your notebook is your outreach section. This is going to cover pretty much anything that you don't that isn't robot related. It covers any demonstrations you do, tours, any mentoring performed by team. It's the part of FIRST where, you know, FIRST is about more than just robots, and this is the part that it's about as well. So there are 3 different main types of outreach. The first is outreach within the local STEM community. This would involve any learning you do about STEM. So like tours with STEM companies, if you're talking with STEM professionals, learning about careers, maybe you go to like a college and you tour their engineering department, with your group to learn about how in college you could be applying the same robotics experience that you're getting now. It's just about learning about STEM. The next would be outreach within the FIRST community. So this is things where you are working with other teams and you're helping to make FIRST and teams in FIRST learn more. So you're mentoring other robotics teams, maybe volunteering at a qualifier or at some other event. Or it could even be just like teaching a class or attending a class. It's about learning in the FIRST community. And then there's also outreach within the general community where you're promoting FIRST and you're trying to get other people involved in FIRST or in STEM. A lot of things, you want people to learn about STEM and to expand their knowledge and get excited about STEM because if you're on a robotics team, you probably like STEM and science and technology and stuff, but there are a lot of people out there who don't know as much about it. And so if you could share your love of STEM and learning with them, then that's something that you can document in the notebook. One of the best ways to document this would be with photos. If you take photos at events and you're showing people, yes, we were there, this is what we were doing, you actually see yourself actively engaged in the community, then that is really good for documenting the entire process.
A very useful thing to do with your notebook is to tab pages. Tabbing pages makes it more likely that judges will look at it, though it does not guarantee judges will look at it. So what you want to do is tab your best pages, but you also want to tab a good variety of pages. You don't want to have all your pages tabbed about the same subject because that will not show the full scope of what you do as a team. You want to have tabbed pages that include a wide variety of subjects such as design, code, CAD, and testing, as well as important design changes and decisions you've made along the way. Basically, you want it to really show the progression of your team and why you should win awards. Though, again, tabbing pages do not guarantee they will look at it, so do not make them your only good pages.
So the one-page summary. This is a single page that goes preferably in the front of your notebook that basically gives the judges an overview of who you are and what your team is about. It can include things like your seasonal goals or what you like about your motto for your team or what your team is located with, whether it's Boy Scouts or 4-H. This is also where you can document what your tabbed pages are about. For example, you could say tabbed page number 8 is about the torque calculations we did for our slides. You want it to be kind of concise. Think of it as like an elevator pitch, but on a piece of paper.
So keeping your notebook organized is a very important thing to do. It'll allow everyone who's looking at it or anyone to understand exactly what's going on because it's very clear. So you do want to document literally every single meeting, every outreach event, every competition, every tour, basically everything that you do, and you should always just pick a format and just stick with it. You don't want to change a format halfway through the season, because especially if it's handwritten, because then that might look kind of like unorganized and weird looking. So you want to keep the same format. And if you're using an electronic notebook, you can switch around the format a bit, but I recommend just sticking with one the entire season because that's just easiest for time. And for in terms of colors, generally black is, recommended, but you can't, for electronic notebooks, you can highlight things in like, yellow or your team color. Like if you have like a really important word that you want to like highlight, then you can highlight that with like a color that does.
Okay, so this is just general advice for when you're making your notebook. First of all, you want to write down everything. Everything you do is important. This is about your journey as a team, as we said before. And if you're skipping small details, those small details could be crucial to explain. Maybe you had a day where you were having some serious issues. Maybe you were disconnecting and you couldn't figure out why. And because you didn't find a solution, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't write it. But you should write about it, because this is not only helpful for people to see your process and to see, yes, you were having a difficulty and it lasted a couple meetings and it took a while to figure out, or maybe you were just tossing around ideas and you ended up never going anywhere with them, but this is why you didn't. You want to show this process, and sometimes this can also help you, because if you were having those disconnect issues and later down the road, you, like maybe in a season or two, you realize, oh, we're having disconnect issues, and it could be the same problem as before. So you can use these notebooks over the years to go back and find things that maybe helped you. So for example, like this year, our team was looking for a specific spring we used for spring loading or tensioning our slides, and we actually went and looked in past notebooks to see what they used for some of their past designs, because it really helped us to figure that out. Another thing about the notebook is the max thickness of the notebook, according to the guidelines, is 3 inches. So if you are doing an electronic notebook and you're going to print it all out and put it in the binder so that you can bring it into the competition, it has to be a maximum of 3 inches. So when you're getting the binder, look for the size requirements, because you don't want to get like a 4-inch binder, because that could get you disqualified, and obviously you don't want that. So some of the crucial things to include in your notebook are photos. Photos are incredibly important. I know I mentioned them in the outreach section, but not just in outreach. You should document with photos for all of your build process, take pictures of your robot, of small assemblies you do, CAD. You can photograph your code and put that in the notebook. Just photographs of everything you have, because photos show that you're not only writing about it, but you're actually going and executing it and seeing. And when the judges are looking at the notebook, they don't have time to read a giant paragraph. They have to look at several notebooks. So they're not going to be able to read a full page of just words. But if they see the words and they can skim the words, but they also see a photo, then that it will help them get a better idea of what you're talking about. So if you have photos, and like drawings are good, but especially photos. I'm going to emphasize that a lot. So also math. I'm a math person, so I love math, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about. But there are people who don't enjoy math, and I respect that. However, you still need math in your notebook. Math. There is so much math that can be done whenever you're working with anything related to physics or engineering, and there is so much math that is probably getting performed throughout your season. So documenting that is a great way to follow your process. And sometimes if you make errors, then you can look in the notebook and you realize, oh wait, we calculated it using the wrong values. That's why we're running into an issue. And also it's just great to show it, because it does show that you're actually applying knowledge that you've gained, and you are using it for things, even if it's something as simple as like a torque calculation on the servos, or you're using numbers to figure out what length your linkage is. If you're just using math, just put it in the notebook. Always put it in, especially because you put a lot of times when you're doing math, you put a lot of effort into it, and you should showcase it, but also just math. Anyways, so you also want to include dates and times for the meetings. Because you do want to show how regularly you're meeting. And sometimes you might like realize that you were running out of time before one of your qualifiers, and you're like, it seems like we just didn't have enough time to get stuff done. Well, how many times were we meeting? Do we maybe need to meet for a little bit longer on some days? It's great. It's useful for you as you're looking back and trying to figure out what your plans for the future are. And it also shows that you're not just like doing everything in one day, and then you're like, we built the robot in 2 hours and we're done and we're going home now, and then we came to the competition 4 months later. It will help you track your process, and it'll show how many times you're meeting and just give a general idea of what your schedule is. Also, did I mention photos yet? Photos are key. I'm just keep going back to photos, because there are so many things you can take photos of, and you should take photos of. So I highly recommend putting in lots of photos. You should also have any testing and document your decisions. So let's say you're trying to figure out whether you want, let's say you have a depositing mechanism and you're trying to decide whether you want to use a linkage to power those slides or if you want it to be powered using a spool and string. You might use tests with both of them and see which one's faster. And you should document that test and write it up like maybe a test plan and report, and then put it in the notebook, because then that keeps track of your testing and what you discovered, which then kind of ties into the decision-making process, which maybe you use like decision matrices to decide your decisions, which is like a weighted way of figuring out, well, what is important about the decision we're making? Like, what's the most important thing? Is it speed? Is it how cheap it is? Is it how much space it'll take? Just whatever decisions are helping you, then you can use a decision matrix to weight it. We can go over that a bit more if anyone's interested later. But yeah, just documenting how you make your decisions, because you don't want to be like, well, we flipped a coin and that is how we decided whether our robot was going to have tank drive or mechanical drive. Because there should always be a reason that you decide anything with the robot. And if you document that decision process, you can remember why you decided to do that. So maybe then even later down the road, you might go back and look and say, well, why did we decide to do this? And there probably was a reason that you made that decision. So if you write it down, then later you're going to remember that reason. Also, sign off the pages you write. It just helps to keep track of who's writing what, and it shows that you're actually like taking kind of credit for what you write. And if you have we like to have two people sign it. So you have like the author sign the page, and then you also have someone else who has gone back and checked what the author wrote, because then it also shows active participation, and it helps to teach people that you show that multiple people are looking at the pages and they're not getting written and then just like tossed aside and never looked at again. So that's always helpful. Also, photos again, just another reminder that photos are important. Yeah, just photos. And then there are hand-drawn or electronic sketches. So anytime you're trying to show a process, if maybe you're planning things out and you haven't actually built something, but you want to show how it works and how the concept works, then you're going to want to sketch it out. So we have a sketch in the top right-hand corner of this slide. But we're also going to show you just an example of a sketch that one of us just made. So really quickly, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yep.
And let's see.
So in 1 second, I'm going to share my screen. So here we have, I'm going to show this one first, a very basic sketch of an intake. As you see, there is two wheels, and generally you want to actually have arrows and things pointing to certain things. So like right here, right now, this isn't very clear of what's actually going on. Like obviously this is a stone, but you want to actually note things out. So this is a stone, and this is a wheel. So things like this is it makes it a lot clearer of what's actually going on. And this is a motor, and you guys get the point. But so another a very important thing is to always have the view listed. So right here is a top view of an intake, and you also want to write intake somewhere or whatever you have a sketch of. And another important thing is this is all labeled and stuff right now, but you still don't exactly know what's going on exactly, so you actually want to have arrows for motion. So these wheels will be turning this way, and when they turn this way, it will actually suck the block up towards the direction of whatever is up here. So now this is a lot clearer. But one other thing that you might not entirely know yet is that this is nice, but you don't actually know that the intake is actually supposed to be at an angle. So you actually, for each and every sketch, you actually want to have another view. And this will allow you to understand fully what's going on. this is a side view. I wrote that wrong. This is a side view. Sorry for my bad handwriting, but hopefully you can still tell what it says. So this is actually at a 20-degree angle. And you can write like a little math portion or something, and you always have descriptions somewhere around it explaining what it is. Again, this is a motor, this is a wheel, this is a belt, and things like that. And it makes things so much clearer for what's going on, and it allows you to understand what's going on for yourself, and it also allows anyone else who's looking at your notebook to understand what's going on, and they know that you know what's going on. So sketches are extremely important. You want to have lots of sketches everywhere, sketches on the ceiling, on the walls, everywhere. And these are very important. And right now, like this whole entire thing probably took me like a minute. You don't have to spend that long at all on sketches. They can be very quick and easy. But I do recommend still writing them out first before actually hand drawing them in a traditional notebook, because you can't erase things, because you can only use pen in a traditional notebook. In electronic notebooks, it is a little bit easier. You can just draw something up, photograph it, and send it over or whatever. But generally, sketches should always be hand-drawn. I know this is digital, but this is easiest for what I can do. So sketches are very important for what you demonstrating what's going on and such, and always have 2 views, and then you will be on your way with having a good notebook with lots of sketches.
All right, cool. Thanks. So yeah, as you can see, there are plenty of different ways that you can make sketches. So let's go back here. There are plenty of different ways to do the sketches, and they don't take time. So I know a lot of this stuff might sound like it's very time consuming, but it's really not. And so if you just, some people don't enjoy writing as much, but if you just sit down and get it done, a lot of this can get done very quickly. Don't make it messy. Like, try and take your time and make it look nice. But even like you saw, that took a minute. So if you sit down for maybe like 5, it's fine. And yeah, so don't stress about it taking too long, because it really, once you get the hang of it, won't take long at all.
Oh, and also you don't have to have very good writing skills or whatever to have good sketches. You just need to get that idea across, and there you go.
Some more tips and tricks relating to more organization. You want to make sure that everyone writes in the notebook. It can reflect badly on your team if you have just 1 or 2 people working on the notebook. If you have like a 12-person team, it makes it look like you're not sharing the work. But another tip is to put time and thought into your entries. Helpful tip is to draft your entry before entering it, writing outline on a separate page. That way you can avoid errors, especially in the written notebook. This is helpful because you'll be wanting to use pen, and if you make an error, you have to cross it out, which does not look nice. You also should have an overview of the team and robot on a separate page. This is separate from the team summary, and also you should have photos.
So moving on to the questions you guys have been asking on Slido. Thank you for that. I'm going to take the one that asks about a mix of electronic and handwritten. There seem to be a couple that kind of ask the same thing in a different way. So the answer is yes, you can have a mix of electronic and handwritten. You are allowed to have 2 notebooks, which means you can separate them completely and have 1 notebook purely handwritten and 1 notebook purely electronic. Things to think about putting maybe in an electronic one might be stuff like your outreach documentation, because that's something that the judges might not care as much whether or not every single person is writing an outreach page, because it's not as much about writing about your robot. Definitely, I would consider maybe having your meeting logs as a part that's in a handwritten notebook, so that the judges can tell that everyone was putting time into the meetings and what they were writing about it.
I'm just going to cut in really quickly. Yes, we will be providing the slides after, so that'll come in an email so that you can have access to this presentation. All right.
So another question is asking if we're going to be recording this video. There's a question in the chat that's asking if it'll be on YouTube to watch later. I do not know about this. Do one of you guys know?
It's being recorded. I believe it will be shared. I cannot. Yeah, it will be shared, and it's going to be on YouTube. So, yeah, you'll have access to the presentation and these slides both after. So that will be there.
So another one of these questions is, do you recommend doing a notebook entry for each practice, like summarizing what happened in the practice? And the answer is yes. You want to be summarizing what happens in basically every meeting. In terms of driver practice, you can have something that just says we did some driver practice, but it would be nicer to involve more things that are similar to, how much you got. Another thing that was kind of important to us for several seasons in a row was actually documenting like our progress for driver practice and stuff, and we documented how many cycles or stones we stacked and whatnot, and slowly we started improving, and you could just see like a graph or something of how we improved over several times. So yes, definitely document what's going on in driver practice and at every meet.
Okay, hold on, I am switching over to the Slido page so that we can all see it. There we go. So,
We're looking at popular right now.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take the question that is there such a thing as someone who is in charge of the notebook? Yes, you can have someone who is monitoring the notebook. Many teams do have someone who is their notebook person, per se, who is mostly in charge of writing the notebook and working on things like that. However, that does not stop other people from writing in the notebook, and you should have other people act like even if you have one person whose main job is the notebook, that person can have the task of allocating out other things for people to write so that everyone still does put some information into the notebook, and everyone should be reading the notebook and making sure that just because you didn't write the page doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it, because that will help the team stay up to date, and you want everyone to be aware of what's going on. So like if you have specific programmers and the notebook person isn't a programmer, they might not know how to describe necessarily some of the functions that the programmer is doing, or if they aren't working on the hardware, which is why you should have a lot of interaction between the roles, and the roles shouldn't limit the people, because you do want to have a cohesive team where everyone kind of knows what's going on with the team and with every aspect. And so something you could do, like maybe in a meeting, is you have people update themselves, and you use the notebook as a way to do that. So if you have a notebook person, don't limit that person, don't make that person the only person who works on the notebook at all. They are just kind of in charge of it. That would be my recommendation for that.
So one of the questions here is, can you only tab 8 pages? The answer to this is yes, that is a rule. But the thing is, the pages you tab between every competition are allowed to change, because your notebook is changing throughout the season. It's growing, it's getting better, it's documenting your journey. So the pages you might tab for competition in December are not going to be the same pages you might want to show to the judges at a state's competition in January. So you are only allowed to tab 8, but they also are allowed to change.
Another one of these questions is, how thick is your engineer notebook? The max thickness is 3 inches. So anything above that will probably be disqualified. So make sure that any notebooks that you have and hand in are under 3 inches. And I don't exactly know. I think it is based off of the ring size if you have like an electronic notebook, but someone else can help with that, because I'm pretty sure it's just like the total max thickness, so anything like the entire notebook,
So
how thick it is.
if you're looking for a binder to buy, then the binder should be a 3-inch binder at most. So, if you're looking at binders, they usually say, like on the front, they'll say 3-inch or 2.5 inch or 1 inch. You can get like down to half an inch. But yeah, so if you do get a binder and you want to maximize the amount you can put in, go with a 3-inch binder. If you go for 3.5 or 4 and they notice, the judges are allowed to disqualify you and may actually go on to disqualify you because the rule is 3 inches. When you're purchasing like a handwritten notebook, most of them do not go over 3 inches. So you shouldn't be too worried about that with purchasing a notebook to write in. However, for the electronic ones, that is where you need to look at it, because you do need to print things out and put them in a binder, because you can't like share with them a computer file with your notebook. You have to actually print it out and bring in a hard copy of it. It's just all right. So I'm going to answer the question, is the FTC engineering notebook similar to FLLs? So I actually haven't participated in FLL, but I do believe there are some areas where it overlaps, and I think FLL has the project, which a lot of their documentation is about, if I recall correctly. However, I do not. I do believe there is a lot of overlap. So if you have worked on FLL and done the FLL notebook, I would recommend doing some reading up. They do have an official engineering notebook guidelines, which is where we find some of the rules about like the 3-inch limit, the 8 tabs, which obviously we're talking about this past season because it hasn't come out for the 2020-21. So it could change, which is why it's always recommended that you go and check up on these, because some of these rules do change actively.
Another one of these questions here that I'm just going to answer because it does require a little bit of researching, but one of the questions is, where do we get these notebooks? And the 3-ring binders you can find at basically any store like Home Depot or Staples probably. But a handwritten notebook, we got ours at Book Factory. So if you want, I just put in the link to, or not a link, but what you need to search for to get a whoops, that was private. One second. But so this is Book Factory is something that we've used for our handwritten notebook. It's just, you can kind of get, there's a large variety of stuff on it. I just looked at the website, and you can get different styles and sizes of certain different types of notebooks. Like there are log notebooks and equipment log notebooks, which are kind of different, and you can kind of pick and choose from what you like best from there. So definitely recommend looking at that for handwritten notebooks.
So one of the questions here is, would you split up your notebook into different sections like program, mechanics, outreach, etc.? So yes, you can do this. This is one of the advantages to having 2 notebooks instead of just 1, is because in a notebook, especially if you have an electronic notebook, it's a lot easier to separate things out into different sections. If you have only solely a handwritten notebook, this might be a little harder because you divvy up a section for a certain area, but if you suddenly have more to put in there, you kind of run out of room because the next page is another section that you are starting that's about mechanics instead of about outreach. So it's a good idea maybe to split up some things that you want to have sectioned into a separate notebook, which is why the option to have 2.
So what we did is we had our one notebook for meeting logs and the other notebook set into like outreach, code, and engineering that showed separate sections, but the meeting log showed our design over time.
All right. So this question is, how do we make sure the judges know that we all contributed to the team if some brainstormed ideas? So obviously when you're writing things, you're probably going to have like one person write a single page and such. But if you're all participating in the brainstorming process, then you should definitely, that is where photos come in. Because if you do take a photo of you all sitting together, brainstorming and working together and like drawing on a whiteboard or drawing on paper or just coming up with these ideas and working together, then you have a photo showing that you are all actively participating. And if you put that in the notebook, then it will show that you all are actively participating. And then that is where signing pages go in, because that shows that people are actively participating in reading and writing in the notebook. But also that is one of the reasons that I emphasize photos so much, because the photos should be showing that they shouldn't just be of the actual, like if you're working on the intake, don't just take a photo of the intake, maybe take a photo of someone actually screwing something in on the intake, because that kind of shows that you are getting stuff done. So this is something where you might want to collaborate a bit with like your mentors and say, hey, could you like take photos during the meeting? And then you can have like a shared file with all or with all of the photos. So maybe like Google Photos is a great way. You can just post all of your photos from the team meetings, and then you can find them and you print them out and you put them in the notebook alongside with the brainstorming. So that also kind of provides a break, because like if you notice in magazines when people are writing articles, they put the photos in so that it's not a giant block of text, because then as you're reading it, your eyes kind of, start to wobble. And it's like, obviously reading books is awesome and stuff, but if you're trying to document something technical and you want photos just to kind of show that.
I'm gonna answer a couple here that have been partly answered before, but one of them is on having two notebooks. Is it just like one really long notebook that fits into two? And we partly went over this before, but like for example, our notebooks, we tend to have one handwritten meeting logs notebook that's just meeting logs and anything that goes on in meetings and whatnot. And we have an electronic notebook that's basically outreach and design reviews and anything else that doesn't really involve exactly what's going on at meetings. And another one is, where'd they go? I keep jumping around a lot, I'm sorry. Should we include last names on anything in the notebook? You can, which we do, but I believe it's not actually recommended anymore. So you probably can just stick with first names and just let it slide like that. And the last one I'm going to answer for now is, how do we get everyone on the team to do the notebook instead of only 2 or 3? This one is a very popular question. I'm assuming that's because lots of people have this issue. As for team members not wanting to, we can't really help too much, but I would say try to make it less like you're trying to pull their teeth trying to do the notebook. Like the notebook should help you a lot during your season, so try to make that clear. Obviously everyone should be writing in the notebook no matter what their role is. If they're just trying to do like little code fixes or something, write in the notebook. If you just screwed a single screw in or something, like, I don't know, fixing something, you want to write fixed intake or whatever you did. Basically, you just have to make it clear that whoever is doing things at meetings has to also write in the notebook what they're doing, and that's what we would recommend doing, because that allows them to know what they're writing about, which obviously will help them and their chances of writing in the notebook, and it'll also help them write more frequently. And if they still don't want to write, then just poke them with sticks.
Just to piggyback off of that, one thing you can do if you have a schedule during your meeting is you can, if there are people, I know some people test writing and think that writing in the notebook is very painful. However, if you make it so that they it's the first thing they have to do, and you're if you have someone who is a driver maybe, and you're like, we're not doing driver practice until you've written your entry in the notebook, then suddenly everyone is waiting for them to finish it. And Okay, it's not necessarily something that you want to do all of the time because you don't want to frustrate people, but that is just some encouragement. If you make it the first task that they have to get done, it's kind of like you have to eat your dinner before you have dessert. So that way, for the people who are less interested in writing the notebook, they are doing it first, right off the bat, and it really helps.
And definitely don't be too aggressive about it, because then they'll start being, being a little bit aggressive back. So just, be calm, be happy.
Yeah.
So one of the more popular questions here is, what is the difference between an overview of the team and the robot and the one-page summary? So an overview of the team and the robot is something that personally our team, we put in our electronic notebook. It includes things like you can have team bios in there. So a little blurb, like a mini paragraph that each member writes about why they're interested in FTC, what they're doing, what they want to learn out of the year. And then you can go a little bit deeper into what your robot is. So this might also be something that changes over the season as your robot design changes as well. You can have a little bit of in-depth into each subsystem of your robot, but obviously on one page, you can't fit all of that. So the one-page summary is just like as quick and as fast as possible to tell the judges why they should be interested in you and why they want to look through your notebook.
All right, so I'm going to answer a couple of these questions here. So are the tips and tips to make a better impression on the judges? Yeah, they're trying to help make your notebook look, stand out, and just trying to help make the entire process easier. But it's not just about the judges. It's also about just making the documentation stronger overall. It helps to give an idea of what you should document and how, so that your notebook is easy for not only the judges to read, but for you to read, and easy to follow entirely. And it kind of helps to encapsulate the entire process. So the things like math, that math is crucial because it shows that you're applying what you're learning, but it's also useful because then you can go and check your work later. And like if you're doing work calculations, that's something that you're probably going to do several times throughout the season. So if you have the first example, then you can then use that as you do the second set of calculations. Or if you have like a new member and you're trying to teach them to do those calculations, then you can do that. Also, for what should a rookie team put for their history, you actually are going to be starting new. So you want to explain, like, we're starting fresh. Talk about how you formed your team. So like you obviously had to get together somehow and be like, hey, let's start a robotics team. So how did that process come along? Like, are you coming from FLL? Are you coming from another robotic competition, or are you totally new? So, and if you're totally new, what made you decide to go to robotics? It's kind of, you're kind of providing a basic introduction. So maybe you came from other teams and you wanted to start your own so you could expand on yourself, or just the team history. That is kind of, it's going to be shorter, obviously, because you're a newer team. But then you can even start with that, and then as you go on over the years, add to it. So like our team likes to continue our team history rather than rewriting it every year. Of course, as time goes on, it gets longer, and you don't want it to get excessively long, so you do have to go back and edit things. But that way, this will be kind of your basic foundation block. Like, why are we a team in the first place? And how did you recruit yourselves? Specifically, because you're going to be starting with all new members to the team because the team is new. And so how did this new team come to exist? Because that'll also help with your sustainability, which is something that you really want to emphasize, that your team will be sustainable and isn't just going to be there for 1 year and then gone. All right.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, another one of these questions is, we should document failures, right? And yes, definitely document failures. If like a test report is like, it did not work, this mechanism can't work with our current robot, and we did all that work, still put it in. It looks really good. It shows that you are learning and that you know what you have to do to get better after that. It's also important to show that to the judges and whoever else is looking, that you are learning too. So yes, definitely put in any failures that happen at meetings or anything like that. Even if it's like safety, like if you accidentally cut yourself on something, you want to say like, next time we need to be more safe of what we're doing. Also, I'm using Paint Tool Side for that sketch.
Okay, Nathan, you want to answer the next question?
Yes. Which one is that one?
Take your pick.
The one at the very bottom, probably.
Yeah.
No, of the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Right above the one that I just answered.
Yeah.
About,
So
the Paint Tool Side. Go down a bit.
Down a bit more.
There we go.
That one right there.
Not the one above.
So you're asking if the summary page should be bullet points or if you include an overall paragraph. You could do either. I think for like the one-page team summary, you can do bullet points. It's easier to read. But for your like your other page, try to remember what it's called. Sorry. Where you're to like summarize your robot, your team, and your journey, you should probably do an overall paragraph. Though it's up to your discretion.
Also, remember that a lot of these suggestions are just that, suggestions. You want to make your notebook yours, and you want it to stand out. And a lot of the appealing aspects about these notebooks are that they are unique and they stand out. So you want to personalize it, and maybe for the summary page, like you detest bullet points. If you do, then don't put them in. Although I recommend trying to keep it concise, and you don't want a giant, you don't want it to look like your 5-paragraph essay that you had to write for English last week or whatever. You want it to look like a submission. So try and customize it and make it reflect your team, and decide what image you want and go with that. But yeah, kind of just take in what Nathan said there.
Another one of these questions is, if you get it out a bit. Can traditional notebooks include printed out computer drawn sketches like the example, or can they only be hand drawn? They can be either, but hand drawn is preferred. The one that I just did earlier, that if you make it look nice and pretty, yes, you can definitely put that in the notebook. Another thing is that for electronic sketches, CAD is a huge thing to do. You want to CAD everything on your robot, but also you can have CAD sketches in the notebook, which look really impressive if you want to have even an entire CAD section in your notebook, in one or the other notebooks that you have, or just the only one. So CAD is a major point for like any design things or anything like that. So you definitely want to CAD your entire robot and have sketches of certain parts. And if you have 3D printed parts, make a sketch in CAD of that part and put it in there. Those look super good. And something that I forgot to mention earlier about the hand-drawn sketches, if you're doing a CAD sketch or a hand-drawn sketch or whatever sketch, you want to have dimensions in there. So like, for example, if I were to have dimensions in a sketch that I just drew earlier, I would put in 4-inch compliant wheels. Those were 4-inch compliant wheels, by the way. And then I would also state how far apart they were. So from the very edge to very edge, those two compliant wheels would be about 3.5 inches away from each other, which means that they would squish a little bit. And you can also add that into a description, like these are 3.5 inches apart, which means that they will squish the block a little bit, and for us to be able to collect it easier and launch it into the back of our robot. That looks really good. Make sure you write that down and make sure that you have dimensions in there. And no matter what sketches you do, still hand-drawn is preferred, but you can do electronic. Anything, as long as it's from you guys, you can put it in there.
So could you explain what some good math pages are? There are so many different math applications that you can use. Almost anything you do on the robot or in the code could use math. I highly recommend doing things like stress analysis, which requires some physics and math. So you look at how much strain whatever is under. So maybe like you have a support system that's under a lot of strain or stress, or you have a motor that's under stress, or a servo. That's good for a stress analysis. You could do torque calculations. Torque calculations are always great because they help you not only determine whether what you're trying to do with a motor is doable at all, or with a servo. They also help you determine how fast things are going to be. So like when you're making a set of slides, you don't want to just make the slides and be like, well, I hope it's fast. You should use calculations to maybe determine how heavy your item can be so that your motors will work, and how fast it will be. So like one of the things we did is we used math to determine what size our spool would be so that we could lift our slides in 1.4 seconds.
Can you please like the comments that we already answered? Sorry, it's getting a little bit hard to understand which ones are answered and which aren't.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to ask that.
That's fine.
I was going to answer one, but I didn't know if it was answered before or not.
Okay. Yeah, so there are so many different ways you can use math. Also, a lot of programming does require math and calculations. So definitely have the programmers on your team explain that math and have it documented for the notebook, because there's so much math in the code that you could document and you should document. Like you could be using math for your vision program. Math, if you're using odometry wheels, that is a ton of math right there. And so that is something you definitely want to document on the mechanical side. Like I said, the torque, the stress analysis, the torque analysis. There are several different things you could do. So depending on what parts you're using, you can use math in different ways. You might even just looking at like a spatial analysis. So you're like, at the beginning of the season, if you're like, this is what we want to have, how much space do we have? You just like calculate how much area each item will take. So like your drivetrain's going to take up some space. And so that could be done like hand in hand with CAD and math, because you could calculate the area and be like, well, this is how much area we have left for like wiring and electrical work and stuff. And so just there can be like simple math like that. And then you can go like as far as down to doing like linear algebra or calculus, and every calculation you do, usually you can do it at different levels of difficulty. So like the torque analysis, you can use a basic torque analysis that just determines the stress and strain, and then you can also go on to determine like acceleration and stuff using integration, and that brings in calculus. So always try and like figure out whatever level of math you guys know, you can then use that, and it can be used at different levels. So kind of show a variety of different applications and try and just apply math wherever you can, because it's also really useful.
So guys, it is almost 2 p.m. right now, so we will be answering a couple more, and then any other questions that are remaining, we will probably be sending out answers later. So if we just want to answer like, 5 or 6 or how many more, and then we'll have to leave then.
So one of the questions that's at the top of the question list right now is, would you suggest that sketches and descriptions of different mechanisms be a part of daily logs, or should they go into a separate engineering section? So the answer is kind of like, why not do both? A daily log is what you did that day. So if you were working on something and it's something that should be sketched out, then yes, that should go in the daily log. If on that particular meeting day you were building a mechanism in CAD, then maybe take a picture or a screenshot of that mechanism, print it out, and then put it in your daily log, because that's what you did that day. But you can also have separate sections that might just be specifically about CAD or about math, and since they're not only in the daily log, you can then put them all together, so it shows like a progression of what your CAD progression or your mathematical progression was.
Okay.
Sorry, you can speak.
Sorry, I was trying to like things. I just wanted to back up and answer the other math question I saw.
Oh yeah, by all means, take all the math questions.
I love math. So integrating math in a specific section or sprinkling it around, you can have a specific calculation section, and you can also sprinkle it around. So if you do meeting logs, which you definitely should do, and document each meeting, document the math in that section, but you can also then go and write up sort of like the testing. If you write up reports for it, you can then make a math section where you're just like, this is all of the torque calculations we did. This is all of the programming calculations that we needed. This is all of the stress analyses we did. So you actually, it's really up to the discretion of the user. I would recommend having some sprinkled around. So if you do have a section for math, if you're just doing one notebook, then probably just keep it within that section. But if you're doing two, or you have like a separate log, then try and spread it out. So you show that you have the math all in that section, but you also have it throughout the entire notebook, you know? So if there is something that you're talking about, like whatever programming aspect you did, you then might want to go into the math that you did, but you also then can say, please refer to this section for more information or something. So that's kind of how I would deal with that. But it's a lot that, and the answer to that is really, it's up to you. I recommend having it sprinkled around, and possibly doing both. But, you know, you can really decide for you and for your team what's best. Okay.
So one of the questions here is, who/should someone control the notebook and what goes into it? I mean, I don't think any team really wants to have a dictator who's telling them all what to do, but you can have a general consensus. It's not a bad idea to have someone who's in charge of the notebook in general. They should not be the only person writing in the notebook. And you should always be able to discuss with them if you think that you want to be able to write something in the notebook, or something should go in there that they don't think. You should always have an open dialogue with all of your team members. So no dictators allowed.
Yeah, and also whoever does the activity that you want written in the notebook, where it be an outreach event, or, you know, fixing something on your robot, or, you know, anything relating to basically anything. If someone does something specifically, you want them to write that entry, because it just makes things a bit simpler, because they know what they're talking about, and it just makes things go a little bit quicker in case, like, if someone is, for example, if someone who didn't, you know, CAD design a intake or something is tasked with writing the entry for the CAD intake, they don't know what to write. They can put in a photo maybe if they have the shared folder for CAD, but they won't be able to know why the person who actually did it put this, you know, axle here, or put this wheel at this angle, or anything really. So it's better if whoever is doing it will also write the entry for it, and that'll also just make sure that everyone has an equal amount of work that's put into the robot and outreach events and things like that, because it just makes it look a little bit cleaner, and that, like, everybody is participating.
So that kind of does also go with the coordination question. If you want one member to coordinate, then that member should be aware of what everyone else is doing, so that they can. So maybe you might want one member who's like, we need to write about this, and this, and this is how it should be divided. But you don't want that member to be only doing that. And you might want to, like, something you could do, if it's kind of, if you want one person to do it, then that's fine. But if you don't, then don't. But, like, if you have someone who is in charge of the notebook, then that could be something they do, monitoring people and making sure they get the stuff done. Don't turn it into a dictatorship, like they said. Kind of try and help it. Also, for the question, what awards did our team win over the past few seasons? So this season we won Think at we placed for Think at every competition we went to, I think, and we won it. And we won it at our first competition, and then we won Inspire at the next competition after that, and then we won Connect and got nominated for Design, Motivate, and Think at our third qualifier, and then we got second think at states. Last season, we were nominated for Think at Worlds, so we were a Think finalist at Worlds, and then we also won Think at our state championship. We got second in Inspire. We also placed, I don't remember if it was second or third for these last ones, but we also placed for Design, Innovate, and Control, I believe. Did we also place for Motivate? I don't remember.
I think we
Last
did
year at state, I
sometime,
believe
yeah.
we placed for Motivate, but we might have placed. It was either Motivate or Connect that we placed for. And then we also at our qualifiers, we got Inspire once, we got Think once, and we got Innovate once. And then we placed for Think again at every qualifier. So our team tends to place for Think pretty regularly. But yeah.
We also won the Think Award in recovery, which was 2 years ago at Worlds. We won that award, and then before that at States, we got Inspire. So yeah, like she said, we have a long record of getting the Think Award.
And you got it at ESR in Velocity
Vortex. Yeah, so a very long record.
It's been, we kind of think is, Think's the Notebook Award for those of you who are newer. So yeah, the Notebook is definitely one of our favorite awards.
Yeah,
but,
so for the rest of these questions, we could go a couple more really, really quickly, and then we should probably stop for now. But right now, we should probably just do like one or two more, unless you guys have another suggestion. And then once we are done with this call, we will move on to answering questions in a documentation in a document and sharing them with whoever asked those questions. And we'll probably try to answer every single one, even if we already answer them in the call.
Yeah, that'll just help you. You can just go to one place and have answers to all of the questions.
Yep.
Okay. So, I'm just going to really quickly answer the question. Do you have 2 3-inch binders or a total of 3 inches for both? 2 3-inch binders, which is another reason that I would recommend getting 2 notebooks. You then have twice the amount of space for your notebooks, which is great. And just to kind of piggyback on that, which do you think is better, one handwritten or electronic? I think that both tend to have their own benefits and their own problems. So it's really like you have to kind of look at what you're trying to focus on, because when you're writing, it's great because it's very useful and it shows that you're actually like taking the time to go write it, and it's good for the process. However, it does make it difficult to get it written because only one person can be writing in the notebook at one time, whereas electronic, you can get around that and you can kind of make it, you can use like flashy customizable word things or whatever to change the look of it. However, handwritten kind of has that sort of, I feel like it's sort of like a homey feel because it kind of, you can see the dedication that was getting put into it. So that is why I might then go and say you might want one handwritten and one electronic, because then you can kind of use it because there are certain situations like with your daily logs where it might be more beneficial to handwrite those daily logs and to just get it all written down and do the daily log, because not only is that encouragement for you to get the daily logs done the day you are supposed to, but it also kind of, it shows like, as I believe there's a saying that the judges want to see grease stains and like pizza stains on the notebook to see that you're doing it currently. Obviously, I highly recommend not getting stains on your notebook, but the point of that is that it's showing that you're actively writing it like when you're supposed to be, and not just using it as an afterthought. And so that's where handwritten is beneficial for the daily log. But for like if you're including an outreach section or your business plan, your sustainability plan, things like that, it's easier to get them typed up and put them in like that. So that is why you might want to do one handwritten and one electronic, which is absolutely an option. And I think, a very good one at that.
Let's keep the rest of the answers more brief. There is one other one that I just had selected, but for now we should probably do one or two more if other people want to just keep answering or asking questions.
So one of the questions further
That
down
would be
here
better.
for each entry into the notebook, there should be a signature at the, oh, wait, no, that's not the right question. The question was asking about the judging session and what exactly was
yeah.
the judging session. So basically, during a judging session, you're gonna hand your notebooks to the judges. You can notify them of where your one-page summary is or your tabbed pages, but that's about it. The judging session is for you to talk to the judges, for you to show your excitement for STEM and why you're such a great team, but they're gonna look at the notebook at a completely separate time. So for the judging session, don't expect to go in there and they're gonna be reading through the notebook and you don't have to say anything. That's not how it works.
And one of these other questions is there a limit to the amount of notebooks, which I don't know if we answered before, but yes, you can only have 1 or 2 notebooks. Another one of these questions is, can we combine electronic and handwritten? I'm not entirely sure what you mean, but I believe that you can have some pages that are handwritten. You can definitely have some pages that are handwritten in the electronic notebook and vice versa if you want. You can have like hand-drawn sketches in the electronic notebook, or CAD pictures in handwritten notebooks and whatever. There is definitely no limit to that. You can have a Frankenstein version of a notebook. It doesn't really matter too much as long as it looks organized.
All right. Do we have to include our programming in the, I'm guessing that's programming in the notebook? You would, yes, I highly recommend it. Obviously, you don't have to do anything. It's your notebook. It's your choice. However, if you want to be a standard for competitions and higher level awards, then you're going to want to show that you show the programming and show that process. So I highly recommend having it. Yes. Also for outreach with volunteering at normal community service events count, depends on what you're doing. If you're working to help promote STEM in some way, or you can tie it in to something first related, then I suppose so, yes. However, if it's just something that doesn't relate to robotics or STEM or anything at all, then probably not, because it's more about the promotion of STEM and fields like that you should focus on.
One of the questions we have down here is, so every meeting there are notes and pictures. How do you decide who writes the notebook that gets turned in? I'm not 100% sure exactly what this question is asking, but what I do know is that if you have 2 notebooks, both of those notebooks are going to be handed into the judges. You don't just give them one. So you have to put an equal amount of work into both of them if you're going to have to.
Is it okay to have only have sub-team leaders contribute to non-meeting log sections? That is fine, I suppose. You can divide work up however in the notebook, however you want. If you're showing a variety of people are putting in time, that is the biggest thing we would emphasize. So, yeah. And how would one include the code and programming process in the notebook? In your daily logs, if your programmers were working on something, they can talk about that, describe it, add some math in, or you could have a code section, and you could even just put the entire code in the notebook to show that, or you could detail the autonomous path. If you look at what you need for the control award, a lot of that stuff you could then expand on and turn into a full control or a full programming section. Off-season improvements, yes, a lot of time, especially this year, there was a forum confirmation that anything from the end of the season, wherever your season ended, anything after that counts for next year. There was a forum confirmation of that, so do start that process now, however you choose to do so.
Another question is, during the judging session, are we going to be showcasing the notebook, or are the judges going to look at the notebook in their own time? So, like we stated earlier, the judges will have you hand in their notebook and the control award submission and the one-page summary, and they will maybe occasionally glance at it during your interview, which is another whole thing, but normally they will wait until after and look at it in their own time, so you won't have time to like point things out or anything like that. Don't point things out in your notebook. It looks a bit rude. So you want to just have the one-page summary, describe everything, the tabbed pages and whatnot, and hand in your notebook and give your interview, and they will look at it in their free time. And judges will also come by your pit or watch matches that you play in and watch for gracious professionalism, and try to ask more questions for you later to answer.
Just to piggyback on what Siobhan just said, when she said don't talk, like point stuff out in your notebook during your interview, when judges are asking you questions, your answer should not be, it's in the notebook on page 34. Your answer should be to actually tell them what might be in the notebook on page 34 that is the actual answer to their question.
But you can say, if there's like a graph or something, you can be like, there is a graph in this notebook or whatever, it's on page blanky blank, and then that's it. And then you start talking about it yourself. Don't go in and like actually point to it, but you can say there's a graph or whatever in your notebook, and that's all you should say about it.
Just a heads up, the meeting is going to end in just 2 minutes. So I'm also sending our email, which you could email us if you have even more questions. We also do notebook reviews. So if anyone wants to send sections of their notebook that they want us to look at, and we can provide you personalized feedback with that if you email that email. Also, there is a feedback form for the class and the call. So if you guys could fill that up, we'll fill that out. We will be sending an email telling you about it. There's the forms link, so if you could go there and just fill it out, just let us know what you thought about this meeting and stuff. I believe the meeting's going to officially close in a minute, so that would be awesome.
Additionally, our YouTube will be our YouTube account is FTC 7182 Mechanical Paradox. I sent that in there. Our Instagram is the same thing, I believe, 7182 Mechanical Paradox, unless it's different.
If you look up 7182 Mechanical Paradox, you will find it on Instagram.
Yeah, you will find us. Our Instagram is just Mechanical Paradox. And just follow us on all of our socials, and we'll answer any questions that you have to ask us. Where it be on Instagram or Twitter or really anything, we'll answer those questions as soon as we can. So don't feel afraid to ask questions about anything, not even including the notebook. You can ask questions about mechanical or electrical or programming, whatever you guys feel free. So don't feel afraid to do that. And this session will basically be done now. So thank you guys so much for listening in and asking so many questions. We had a good time answering them, and hopefully you guys did learn a lot. So thank you guys so much.